I'm gonna start this video off with a tangent, because I woke up choosing violence apparently.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
Retroid, if you hear me, we need to talk. I've sent an obscene amount of emails to you by this point. I understand the channel might be too small for you to send me review units. I get it. But at the very least, send me the Retroid Pocket 5, which I freaking paid for. Because by the time you send it, at this rate, nobody's gonna be interested in me covering it anymore, and by the time I get it, we're all gonna freaking talk about the Retroid Pocket 6. So, in case somebody at Retroid sees this, hit me up, I would love for us to be friends. And maybe for me to cover your next handhelds in a decent time frame. Imagine being a YouTuber, not that I'm full of ego or anything, and paying for a handheld that you don't even receive in time to make videos on. How should I put this? I'm not upset, I'm disappointed. I think this is the term. But thankfully, my dear nerds, there are awesome stores out there like Mac DIY who did this job and actually sent me a review unit of the Retroid Pocket Mini. And this handheld, this freaking handheld itself, this is one of the most underrated, unappreciated handhelds in my own opinion. So again, I'm plagiarizing Ross. Grab a snack or drink, your carb of your choice, and let us dive in this rabbit hole together. But before I begin, I just want to say that even though this review unit was sent by Mac DIY, this video is 100% my own, meaning that no money exchanged hands, nobody sees this video beforehand, nobody gets any special privilege. If a handheld would suck, I would be the first one to tell you. First of all, let's start this off with a very quick unboxing, and I just want to take a second and appreciate the small touch that Mac DIY did with putting their branding on the box. You know, it's kind of in good taste, it's not tacky, it isn't one of those obnoxious stickers. But anyway, let's open this freaking thing. We have the world's smallest pamphlet manual with only the specs and what each button is. Besides this, I also got a screen protector, which is freaking awesome given that the whole handheld is, well, with a glass front. But for now, we'll throw that away. We have one of these foam things, the handheld, which I also graciously put back, and a beautiful USB-C cable, which should go in your drawer full of cables, which you might use one day. But this one is specifically branded by Retroid, which again I think is a very nice touch. You know, one thing that you should know about the Retroid Pocket Mini is that it actually got a lot of flack since it got released. I heard stuff like it's gonna creak and it's not with good build quality. Well, I'm sorry to say, and it's not that I woke up and chose violence or anything.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
But that's the most naive argument ever. Of course, if you're gonna take a handheld, any freaking handheld, and you're gonna twist and turn it like this, it's gonna creak. It's impossible not to have a handheld made out of plastic, and in this case glass as well, not creak when you do this to it. You know, some people on the internet, YouTubers especially, because they need content, they complain about the silliest of things, and sometimes we just need to call that out. This creaking when you twist and turn it is something that would happen to any handheld that you want to comment this on. And not that I'm apologetical about the drawbacks of this handheld, I'm gonna come to the drawbacks as well. The handheld itself is kind of spectacular for what it is. The first thing that comes to your attention when you put it in your hand is that it has little grips now, little bumps to hold your fingers on, and surprisingly they work. You see, it's actually made out of two bumps, and your fingers tend to naturally rest between them. So in terms of ergonomics, this is a huge upgrade from something like the Retroid Pocket 4, which had a flat back. But call me crazy with this, my dear nerds. I personally loved the flat back. You see, when you have a flat back like on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, this becomes way more pocketable. Now, this doesn't mean that this one isn't pocketable. This one is actually smaller and better to keep in your pocket for a whole plethora of reasons, but you will feel these extra bumps and these extra curves. Having curves is not always a good thing. I just wanted to mention that. But make no mistake, this is the most portable and the most pocket-friendly 4x3-inch handheld, which can do PlayStation 2 and, well, not now, but in the future, even a bit of Switch. And this is one of the main points on why I like the Mini. You see, we didn't have this up until this point. We had handhelds that were 4x3 in screen aspect ratio, but which couldn't do PlayStation 2. We had things like the RG405M, which was an outright gorgeous handheld. But the fact of the matter is that if you were to have put anything above PSP in it, it would cry for its life. This one though, this one has absolutely no problem with anything that's PlayStation 2 related that you throw at it. And not only that, of course you can play PSP, you can play a bit of Wii, you can play anything that basically comes to your mind. But I don't want us to get too distracted with this, my dear nerds, so let's have a look around the device. You see, for such a small unit, they actually, and by they I mean freaking Retroid, they managed to pack a huge cooling solution here. Here we have what I assume is the intake, and air would come out of here to properly cool that Snapdragon 865 SoC. We have the volume buttons, the power on off buttons, L1 and R1, which are pretty clicky, and pretty freaking good feeling L2 and R2. These analog buttons actually feel amazing. On the bottom of the device we have the USB-C, the audio jack, and a tiny door where, wait for it, where we have our SD card slot. Nothing on this side. This, my nerds, is a good thing about this current generation of Retroid handhelds, is that they put the speakers on the front, and dual speakers nonetheless, so that you can get blasted with that sound directly without the sound bouncing off in your hands or other silly things like that. And of course, we have hole-based sticks, the triggers are hole-based as well, some nice RGB here for whoever is into that kind of stuff, a back button, a home button. The D-pad is your usual, well, Vita style kind of D-pad. It's a bit clicky. I personally love clicky D-pads. In my opinion, the buttons feel great, even though a lot of people complained about the ABXY buttons in this, because apparently they are too loud and too clacky. And this, at first, was something that I noticed as well, but to be honest, it kind of gets out of your mind after the first 5 minutes. Yeah, the ABXY buttons are actually quite a bit different sounding, but this is, I would say, something that varies from handheld to handheld. And they aren't bad in the slightest, they are just a bit different, I would say, and sometimes different can be a good thing. One big drawback of this handheld, according to most YouTubers, is the huge bezels around the screen. I'm kind of guilty of this as well. When this first came out, I looked at these bezels and I was like, what the heck even is this? Are they playing with us? What's happening? Well, the truth of the matter is that they probably couldn't find 4-inch AMOLED panels to stick into this thing, so they had to do a compromise there. The panel in itself is 3.7 something inches. It really doesn't matter more than that. Remember, it's 3.7 inches, but it's a gorgeous AMOLED panel, meaning that whatever is black on the panel, that's actually parts of the screen that aren't on in that moment. And this translates to saving a bit on battery life, but also, because it's an AMOLED, we have quite gorgeous saturation. But regarding the bezels, I really wanted to touch on this because a lot of people, including me, I'm a bezel freak. I love bezel-less displays. I've said this in a million of other videos. But here, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, because while the bezels are big, they are not humongous in the sense that people portray them out to be. In fact, let me show you. Here's its papa, here's its father, the great-great-grandfather of this little guy. The Retroid Pocket 4 Pro has, even though it might not appear like it, even bigger bezels than the Retroid Pocket Mini, because a lot of handhelds actually try to trick us with the dual bezel type of design. You see, we have the original black bezel of the screen, and then we have a second bezel of the chassis of the handheld itself. I'm gonna do something which I never did on this channel before, but let me get out the old ruler, and by old, I truly mean old. Look at this thing, I've had it for like 12 years. But yeah, the bezel is more or less, I would say, 1.1 to 1.2 centimeters. And in freedom units, in case you aren't familiar with centimeters, it's kind of like this. I would say half an inch thick, right? But on the Retroid Pocket Mini, let me just put it here. Here I would say it's exactly 1 centimeter, or just under half an inch. Yeah, somewhere around there. So the main curse, the main drawback of the Retroid Pocket Mini is that by sheer design, it makes you feel like the bezel is way bigger than it is, when in fact you've probably played handhelds that have even bigger bezels than this one. And this is like the, I don't know, the thing that makes me sad about the Retroid Pocket Mini. It's actually a very good handheld for what it is. Of course, it has drawbacks. I haven't gotten to them. It appears like I'm glazing this handheld, but wait for it, I'm getting to the bad parts as well. But when it comes to the current complaints, like the bezel or the fact that it creaks if you try to break it in half, yeah, I really think sometimes YouTubers just invent drama for clicks and for viewer retention. Not to make this video unfunny, but yeah, everybody's farming your attention. Including me, I'm not different. But sometimes people just go to silly extremes, in my opinion. This handheld, it's not bezelless. Nobody in their right mind would call the Retroid Pocket Mini bezelless, but it's not a bezel monster either. That's kind of the point. When it comes to specs though, the Retroid Pocket Mini is actually a bona fide overachiever. It has a Snapdragon 865, which was released in December 2019, which might seem old as heck, but in fact for Android handhelds in this niche, that's actually pretty decent. It's the same SoC that we're gonna see in the Retroid Pocket 5, and it's perfectly capable of running PS2 in the most worry-free kind of way, where you have enough performance overhead to not think of the fact that you have to tone down the resolution, you have to tweak stuff. I really hate tweaking on a per game basis. For me personally, this takes the pleasure out of actually enjoying whatever I'm trying to play. But with the Snapdragon 865, this is kind of not the case. Besides that, the Mini has 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage, which of course you can add more by the SD card slot. But what you need to take away from this is that, as far as I know, this is the smallest retro handheld that packs such power, where you can conceivably have the idea that you're carrying a PlayStation 2 in your pocket now. And not only that, this plays quite a lot of things. Look, for example, if you know me, you know that I freaking love Legacy of Kain. This is Legacy of Kain Defiance, this is a PlayStation 2 game. This is the most complicated area, this courtyard right here, and I would usually see dips in this area on basically almost any handheld that I tried, and this includes my phone as well. But the fact that it cuts through this area like freaking butter, well, this is just the perfect benchmark of a handheld holding its own on PS2. Need for Speed Underground, in my opinion, is also one of the most difficult games to emulate, and basically it runs like freaking butter as well. You know, if you played Need for Speed Underground as a kid, I really hope that you picked the Mazda Miata as the go-to car. I basically, for some reason, only played with this car right here for the last 20 years or so of my life, and I cannot see myself trying any other car in this game. This is the nostalgia foundation on which all memories of this game hang on. But as far as performance goes, this plays basically as you would expect. I don't have any frame drops. In case you're wondering, I'm at 2x. I run every game at 2x because in a 3.7 inch screen you really don't need more than this. You really do not. Just for funsies, let's also try some Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, which is an incredible game. If you haven't played this, holy heck, what the heck are you doing with your life, my dear nerd? You need to install this and to play it ASAP. It's one of the most pure racing games ever, where it really concentrates on just you having an awesome car and enjoying the road, you know? And this game really marked my freaking childhood in the most amazing way. I'm still in awe. That's what I guess I'm trying to convey to you. I'm still in awe that we can have oh, go away, you freaking bastard. That we can have our childhood freaking memories into something that fits in our pocket. Some of you fine nerds told me the last video that I should include Dolphin, aka GameCube, and Wii in my tests. And yeah, I heard you guys, and this is for you. But I'm literally a stormtrooper here because I didn't map the controllers properly, so I can barely aim. But this is Call of Duty World at War, and it's running very, very nicely. I'm not noticing any stutters or anything of the sort, but yeah, apparently mapping controllers to Dolphin is a pain in my nerd backside. Besides that, performance-wise, it's running like a freaking dream. Now, I tested more games than this on Dolphin. I tested like 5 games, but I'm not gonna show you the rest of them because, you know, I want to stay away from the wrath of Nintendo, basically. So just assume that both Wii and GameCube work beautifully on this thing. Going to some Android gaming, well, this is a mixed bag. There's no way around it. Games like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic scale perfectly to 4:3, so you can really enjoy a game like this. This is one of the ideal scenarios when it comes to Android games. Other games, however, aren't as lucky. For example, look at this Little Nightmares port for Android. The developers were so freaking lazy here. The game was natively constructed for 16:9, so they just plopped a background image of what I can imagine is hardwood floors in order to compensate for the difference in aspect ratio. Here, the screen is small enough as it is. When you constrict it even more with these basically useless top and down static images, you end up with what essentially is an image so small that you would have to hate your eyes in order to try and play like this. Other games are more curious. For example, Limbo only scales partially to 4:3, meaning that the top and bottom bezels aren't as big as on Little Nightmares, but they are still there, because it's not a native stretch to 4:3 like what we saw in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So for Android games, you know, you win some and you lose some. I would say that this is primarily an emulation device for PS2 and downward. But just for fun, let's look at some stretched out PSP. I don't know why people go insane when I tell them that I love Strech-to-Fit. This is the perfect use case scenario. In a screen this small, you want to use every freaking square millimeter of this screen in order to give yourself a proper gaming experience. And here, I think Strech-to-Fit capitalizes on that. Look at this now. You see how small the screen is? Call me crazy with this. I know a lot of you fine nerds will not agree, but I think PSP is perfectly playable on something like this with a 4:3 aspect ratio screen. And here's Family Guy for the PSP as well, which is incidentally one of my favorite PSP games. It's always a pleasure to see Family Guy on any handheld really. And one good thing about this game is that it works perfectly on the Linux handhelds as well, meaning that it's really not an intensive game. So, what is my conclusion after inspecting this device? Well, the thing is that I had the Retroid Pocket Mini for like close to a week and a half by this point, and I've been playing it constantly. I even took it with me on trips. This is me on a bus with it, and I played the poop out of it, even though I also had the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, okay, this little guy with me as well. These two were in my backpack and I almost never touched this. I almost always went for the Mini. So what you need to remember, in my own opinion, is that even though the screen is somewhat smaller, the fact that it has so much performance overhead makes it just, how should I put this in plain English? It makes it freeing. It makes you have that peace of mind that whatever you want to play, whatever you can't play on a Linux handheld, you can with this. And the difference between the Retroid Pocket Mini, as Retroid intended, was to be way more pocketable than something like the Retroid Pocket 5 or an Odin 2 or whatever the heck other handheld you would get with Android and good performance as well. So when it comes to this specific objective, I think Retroid did very well. The fact of the matter is that they could have done way better. The main breaking bug of this, which I left for the end because it's fixable, is the fact that you cannot play anything Switch related. You can't. I tried. You can't. It's Android 10. And Yuzu wasn't made to run an Android 10. Android 10 is simply a way too old version of Android for some emulators to work properly. And this is why I left it at the end. Retroid did promise us to update this to Android 13 in the near future. Now, the near future might be very near, or might be, I assume, after Retroid stops being busy with delivering all the Retroid Pocket 5s, which, may I remind you, Retroid, not to guilt trip you or anything, but I'm still waiting on mine. Anyway, I don't want Retroid to think that I'm scolding them. I want me and Retroid to be friends. Retroid, let's be friends, let's, collab. But besides that, besides me sneaking little messages to Retroid, I can say that the Retroid Pocket Mini is actually a handheld that I fully recommend. And I don't recommend stuff that I don't believe in. This, well, you know what the good indicator is, to me at least, the fact that I didn't put it down. I am starting to have quite a collection of handhelds in this apartment, they're overflowing in the background as well, and I kept catching myself in my free time, in the time where I spend wasting it on games, I used to grab this besides any other handheld, and that right there, my dear nerd, is one heck of a good indicator that this is something worth, having your sights on. Tell me what you think. Tell me what are your thoughts about the Retroid Pocket Mini? The Retroid Pocket 5 being launched at the same time. I think that's kind of the curse, the second curse that the Retroid Pocket Mini has, because the Retroid Pocket 5 by itself stole a lot of the attention away from the Mini. A lot of people that would have discovered this and would have been happy with this are now ordering the Retroid Pocket 5. And this is not a bad thing. It's not like the 5 is a huge handheld, but I truly think that when it comes to pocketability and power, how pocketable can something very powerful be, I think this is still the undisputed king. And I'm curious if I'm gonna say this eventually down the line when I'm gonna review the Pocket 5, if I'm gonna say the same, but currently I'm convinced that at least when it comes to this pocketability to performance ratio, the Mini has and will have the crown. But this is all from me, my dear nerds. See you in the next video. If you haven't subscribed, do me the solid. If you watched, I know, 40 minutes or whatever long this clip will be after I edit it, then you clearly enjoy whatever neurotic thing I do here, and you might as well do me a solid and subscribe. If you also want to help me out, you can also become a channel member or a Patreon. I would immensely be grateful, because all of the money from that direction goes back into the channel for me to review cool stuff for you in the future. You know, people think having a YouTube channel makes you swim in money. How I wish that were true. Unfortunately, though, it's not. But anyway, I don't want to go off on a huge tangent, because I've been filming, actually this is the second time I've been filming this video. So yeah, until next time, my dear nerd, don't forget that I love you. I always did, and I always will. But, you know, mortals need to rest. I mean, I want to rest because I have to edit. But I hope you do rest. The luxuries that I want for the people that I care about, you know. Bye.